20, Han Min-jae had mastered the art of looking ordinary. Every afternoon, he served noodles in his mother's tiny Seoul restaurant, apologized for late deliveries, and let his family worry that he had abandoned university without a plan. He never corrected them. The silver watch on his wrist looked cheap, and no one noticed that it never showed the correct time. Then, during the season's first hard rain, a beautiful young woman entered just before closing. Yoon Seo-jin knew his favorite tea, the scar beneath his thumb, and the exact minute his father had supposedly died. She placed a moon-shaped locket beside his bowl. Inside was a photograph of their parents together, taken 3 days after the funeral. Min-jae reached for her wrist. Seo-jin did not flinch. She only leaned closer and whispered, "Good evening, Chairman Han."
Min-jae told Seo-jin she had mistaken him for someone else. She smiled, as if she had expected the lie, took back the photograph, and promised to return Thursday at 11:11. That was the one time she should not have known. On Thursday, Min-jae crossed an empty laundromat and pressed his frozen watch against dryer 14. A hidden elevator carried him 40 floors beneath Seoul. Hundreds of engineers stood when he entered. At 17, Min-jae had completed his father's unfinished security system and licensed it anonymously to banks, hospitals, and phones around the world. The holdings were now worth $12.8 billion. Only his trusted chief operating officer, Park Do-yeon, knew the chairman was a restaurant owner's son. Min-jae kept the fortune secret because his father's final message had contained 6 words: "Keep our name buried, or they return." When the elevator opened again, Seo-jin was waiting below.
Do-yeon ordered security to remove her, but Seo-jin spoke one name: Crown Ledger. Every screen went dark. Min-jae's father had built the ledger to record the real owners of Mi-rae Group and every bribe used to steal it. He divided its encryption between 3 people. Min-jae's watch held the first key. Seo-jin's mother, the family's attorney, had hidden the second inside the moon locket. The third was a living voice print belonging to Min-jae's father. Seo-jin had spent 7 years following hospital payments made to a nameless patient. The money ended at a private clinic owned through companies connected to Seoul's celebrated young billionaire, Kang Tae-hyun. She believed Min-jae's father was alive. Min-jae believed she might be leading him into the trap his father feared. Yet the photograph was real, and the locket opened a file no hacker had ever touched. Against Do-yeon's warning, Min-jae gave Seo-jin 48 hours to prove it.
Their first lead was a university archive scheduled for demolition. Seo-jin distracted the guard while Min-jae recovered his father's damaged research drive. Their second lead was a bank account that existed for only 9 minutes each month. By dawn, they had traced it to Taehyun's private foundation. Seo-jin was fearless, infuriating, and far more brilliant than Min-jae had prepared himself to admit. When a black sedan followed them, she pulled him through a crowded night market and laughed for the first time. On a rooftop above the sleeping city, she confessed that her mother had vanished the same night as his father. She was not chasing a billionaire. She was chasing the last person who might remember her mother's courage. Min-jae admitted that building a fortune had been easier than trusting anyone with the truth. Seo-jin placed her hand over his frozen watch. For one quiet moment, it began ticking again.
Seo-jin met Min-jae's family the following evening. His mother fed her twice, Soo-ah asked too many questions, and for an hour, Min-jae imagined a life in which no one needed a secret. Then Seo-jin's phone lit beneath the table. Bring the crown key to Mi-rae Tower, or the Han family learns what he is. She deleted the message before Min-jae could see it. At sunrise, the second key disappeared with her. Headquarters surveillance found Seo-jin entering Taehyun's private office. The recording showed her placing a metal key into his hand. Minutes later, Min-jae's accounts froze, 3 data centers went dark, and Seo-jin stopped answering. Do-yeon played the recording again and said the sentence Min-jae already feared. She found the lonely boy behind the money, and he handed her the door. On the table where Seo-jin had been sitting, Min-jae found only her broken moon locket.
With the company sealed, Min-jae returned to the restaurant and told his family everything. His mother did not celebrate. She asked why a son with billions had watched her count every bill. Min-jae explained that the holdings were the bait keeping his father's enemies visible, but the answer sounded smaller aloud. Soo-ah asked what he had been protecting, the family or his fear of needing them. Before he could answer, his mother brought out his father's old voice recorder. The final damaged sentence said, "Never trust the man who arrives after the fire." An alarm sounded beneath Seoul. Seconds later, Do-yeon entered the restaurant, offering a safe route back to headquarters. He had arrived after the fire. Min-jae replayed Seo-jin's surveillance recording and noticed a crescent scratch on the key. It was not the crown key. It was the decoy they had built together at the university archive. Seo-jin had wanted him to see her betrayal. Min-jae followed Do-yoon underground and pretended to believe him. The moment the elevator doors closed, every lock in headquarters turned red. Do-yoon finally removed his gloves. He had staged Junho's death, installed Taehyun as Mi-dae's public prince, and guided Min-jae's company from the shadows. He had allowed the boy genius to become rich because only Min-jae could build a network large enough to open the crown ledger everywhere at once. Seo-jin had been ordered to deliver the second key in exchange for the Han family's safety, but the key she surrendered was useless. The headquarters screens suddenly filled with her face. From a forgotten maintenance tunnel, Seo-jin told Min-jae to trust the clue, not the performance. Together, they restored one isolated server before Do-yoon could erase it. Taehyun appeared on the recovered channel, terrified rather than triumphant. He gave them the address of a clinic by the river and begged them to end the man who owned them all. Min-jae and Seo-jin escaped through the maintenance tunnel, while Soo-ah kept Do-yoon's security chasing false signals across Seoul. At the Riverside Clinic, room 314 contained a man with Min-jae's eyes. Han Junho had survived the river, but Do-yoon had threatened to destroy both families if he ever spoke his name. Seo-jin asked about her mother. Junho said attorney Yoon had smuggled him out of Mi-dae Tower and disappeared before the police arrived. He had heard her voice once, years later, but never found her. Junho placed his hand over Min-jae's watch and spoke the phrase only the crown ledger knew. Seo-jin joined her locket shard. 3 keys became 1. The ledger opened, revealing every stolen share and every order signed by Do-yoon. Then, a countdown appeared. In 11 minutes, Do-yoon would use Mi-dae's live shareholder broadcast to erase the ledger forever. Mi-dae's shareholder ceremony began beneath 100 cameras. Do-yoon stood behind Taehyun and prepared to announce that the crown ledger had been destroyed. Instead, Min-jae and Seo-jin walked through the boardroom doors. Do-yoon called them children playing with inheritance. Taehyun looked at Seo-jin, then stepped away from the podium. For the first time, he refused an order. Junho's living voice filled the room. The ledger synchronized through Min-jae's network to millions of secured devices, making the evidence impossible to erase. Screens displayed Do-yoon's signatures, hidden accounts, and the order that sent Junho's car into the river. The boardroom turned silent. Min-jae faced the cameras and introduced himself as the founder his own family had never known. But he did not claim Mi-dae. He returned the stolen shares to its workers and victims. Do-yoon had spent 20 years collecting control. Min-jae defeated him by giving it away. By sunrise, Do-yoon's empire was evidence, not power. Taehyun agreed to testify. Junho returned home slowly, learning the shape of the family he had missed. Min-jae's mother refused a mansion and accepted only a larger kitchen for the restaurant. Soo-ah became the first director of a foundation owned by the employees. Seo-jin published the truth under both their mother's names. On the rooftop where they had first trusted each other, she returned Min-jae's watch. It now kept perfect time. She asked who he intended to be without a secret fortune protecting him. Min-jae said, "Just the man who owes you tea." Seo-jin kissed his cheek and handed him one final message. It contained a recent photograph of her missing mother beside the sea, and 7 words. "If the ledger opened, I had to disappear." At the bottom was a train time for Busan. The mystery beneath Seoul was over. Their next journey had already begun.